was critically important. From our board of Changemakers, we also heard about crypto, we heard about Bitcoin, we heard about the money that is flowing in, where it's coming from, about the concerns of the debt in the United States. Then we had that amazing address by His Excellency Yasser Al-Rumayyan talking about the urgency of the moment that we're going through here on planet Earth. And we also heard, of course, from Richard Atias, chairman of the FII Institute, on the concerns of citizens all over the world, being, of course, affordability and poverty amongst the most important concerns, both in the North as well as on the global South. As you can see, we are very keen on data this year here at FII, collecting that data, especially from you, which is why we're asking to participate in our polls. So we went ahead and we asked global citizens the following question: are we headed in the right direction? Let's watch this video. Turn your attentions to the screen.
Perfectly positioned. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to take your seats for our next panel. The Board of Changemakers, Public-Private Powerbrokers. I'm Becky Anderson, the Managing Editor for CNN in the Gulf region and host of Connect the World with Becky Anderson, which is a news program, a nightly news show broadcast from this region, from my home base of Abu Dhabi. Welcome to FII 9 and to the back end of 2025, a year when geopolitics feels like a season finale. Alliances are shifting, trade routes being reimagined, and everyone, it seems, is trying to debug a global supply chain that feels increasingly weaponized. In the face of all of that, we have seen unprecedented alignment between national strategies and private sector resources. And at the center of all of it are the public-private power brokers, the sovereign wealth chiefs, the ministers, the CEOs, the infrastructure investors and the regulators and their whisperers, of course, the people who move capital, cajole policy, decide which projects get built, which technologies scale, and which regulations get politely relabeled innovation-friendly. They operate where geopolitics, the how and the who of power, meets geoeconomics, the art of turning markets into leverage, and they do it at times with the kind of pragmatism that makes the rest of us nod in uneasy agreement. I'm delighted to be joined by some of the world's most effective power brokers today here on this board to discuss how to keep this fragmented world that we've heard some discussion of this morning from fragmenting further. Now, this is no uneasy task. We have less than an hour, but let's give it a go. I'm delighted to have you all here with me today. Your Excellency, Ministry of Investment of Saudi Arabia, Khalid bin Abdulaziz Al-Falih, it's good to have you, and I thought we'd start with you. Earlier this week, you described the tectonic shifts in geopolitics, in global trade, in technology, supply chains, and the rest, converging to, as you describe it, reshape how companies and countries think and operate, how they compete and create value for stakeholders. So, against that backdrop, can you briefly give us a progress report on Vision 2030? What do you see as the Kingdom's competitive edge in 2025? And give us some proof points on these very strategic public-private partnerships that we see underpinning the transformation here.
Becky, thank you very much for doing this again. Good to have you back, and glad to be with this esteemed panel. And as I look at them, each one of them working with us is a manifestation of public-private partnership, both at scale and in terms of quality, underpinned, of course, by long-term relationships of trust and mutual confidence. First question on Vision 2030, the transformation, the extensive pivot that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince launched 10 years ago, when many people, including my friends around this table, thought we're dreaming. This is not a vision, this is a dream. And here we are today. I'll give you some numbers, which I think speak volumes. Our GDP has doubled. Everybody thought that Saudi Arabia rises and falls with oil prices, and they were right. For many decades before that, our eyes were fixated every morning on the oil price to see if we're going to be able to make our finances or have surplus, which we can export for investment and saving abroad. Fast forward 10 years, GDP doubled, mostly driven by non-oil economy of Saudi Arabia. Global FDI has been declining. Last year, declined 11%. Our FDI over the same period quadrupled, and our aggressive targets are being exceeded. Total investment, which is driven not just by FDI, but by domestic, doubled. And we're number 5. We've reached 30% investment in our GDP, and mostly, again, non-oil GDP. Of the FDI, by the way, 90% of the FDI coming into the kingdom is non-oil. Maybe the 10% is Total and Patrick, but the kingdom is humming, and the transformation is indeed being driven by new sectors, exciting sectors. Most of the investments in Saudi Arabia are in sectors like advanced manufacturing, tech, tourism, entrepreneurship, and deep tech VC have gone up by a factor of 10. We've already this year exceeded the threshold of $1 billion deployed in our startup system. We're about 60% of the Middle East. Our non-government spending, we were really dependent on oil, as I mentioned. Today, 40% of our budget expenditures are funded by non-oil revenue. So we've achieved a significant decoupling in terms at the macro level, fiscal. I would say this is the quantitative numeric. I think what's most important to us and to our partners are the qualitative elements in Saudi Arabia. Our unemployment has been halved. Our women participation in the workforce has doubled. We used to have about 500,000 Saudis only in the private sector. Most Saudis were employed by the government. We have multiplied that by a factor of 5. And it's voluntary. The private sector is taking them on. This is not forced employment by Saudi. Our competitive edge, I think, is multifaceted, but most of it, I think, or a lot of it has to do, again, with the vision. The clear, long-term vision of the government, His Royal Highness in particular, not just Vision 2030, but people can predict where the kingdom is going to be in 2040 and 20. Our North Star is clear and it doesn't oscillate with the weather or with what's happening. The tectonic shifts you talked about doesn't change what we're doing. Political tensions don't change where we're going on the economy. Our regulations are excellent and improving by the day. We've brought in a lot of new regulations. Our geographic position, we believe, is a huge competitive advantage. Human resources is a powerful strength for the kingdom. As I mentioned, our fiscal, monetary, currency peg, substantial reserves and buffer that the country have. We can withstand any shock, and we've withstood multiple shocks, COVID, multiple oil downturns, regional tensions, and the kingdom keeps chugging along. Non-oil is growing between 4 and 5%, no matter what happens outside. And then we have our deep pockets. We have the PIF, we have the NDF, we have a strong banking system that provides credit and liquidity to investors. So these are just some of competitive edges. And it happens at a time, as you mentioned in your introduction, where the rest of the world is actually, unfortunately, we don't prey on this, but the rest of the world is experiencing a lot of uncertainty. And in Saudi Arabia, there is certainty.
That's a great start for this panel. Before I move on, I do just want to ask you very briefly, and for the benefit of this audience, whilst those proof points are really very impressive, what there is a lot of noise and reporting about a change in priorities, a spend that is being reallocated or refocused. Can you just speak to the 2025 sort of focus and this strategy for the next 5 years, second half of this vision? Because and you'll also say, you know, Saudi doesn't stop at 2030, of course. You know, that was a sort of goal and a vision. And what that pivot perhaps or refocus means for this sort of alliance economy that we want to discuss today, these public-private partnerships, which are so strategically important to the kingdom.
I think the last couple of years, I mean, it's not specific to 25, but the last couple of years, we've seen the opportunity and its addition rather than subtraction of some huge opportunities that are emerging. The most obvious one is AI and the acceleration of digital and what we used to call the fourth industrial revolution. The ability not just to build the world's most efficient, lowest cost, connected data hub for AI here in the kingdom, but all of the applications that come with it and the disruptions in a positive way that the kingdom can lead in, not just catch up with. So this required some allocation of resources, capital, human resources. His Royal Highness has directed for the creation of a national champion, but other private sector investors in the kingdom are also adding their own resources for the kingdom to be that global hub. And it's not just about accessing the most reliable, least carbon-based energy and electricity for decades to come that the tech world can rely on, but also our commitment to employing it in our manufacturing, in our logistics, in our human resource development, in healthcare, in biotech, in disease treatment and therapy discoveries. So all of this is happening. As we speak here, and we think this is a big conference, 7,000 people. There is over 100,000 people outside Riyadh in a conference for global investing, global health that is taking place. And you mentioned Fortune 500 a few days ago. So the kingdom is architecting where the world is going. Supply chains, we have launched a program called Green Shoring again, capitalizing on our strengths, and we're putting resources, we're building industrial cities, we're creating special economic zones. In the meantime, if you think of the giga projects that were taking a lot of resources from the government, the Riyadh Gate, you can see the construction and the cranes. And tens of hotels are getting ready to start. And the Riyadh Gate, Qiddiya is going to operation very soon. So the focus on those, catalytic nucleus of development. And in NEOM, of course, we have the green hydrogen getting ready to start. Oxygon is, and Sindala has many of its resorts ready to open. So we obviously need to let those assets go to market and see how they operate. And I think importantly, I will end with this. This is the time now to say to the private sector, you've seen us do what we promised, you've seen us exceed our targets. So public-private, it is time for us to maybe scale back on this government or PIF spend to prove and to seed some of these value chains and clusters, and let the private sector come in and start investing. And this is what we're doing day in and day out at the Ministry of Investment, at the PIF, and across the government.
So, thank you, Excellency. And I know my esteemed panelists will welcome that first sort of table-laying opportunity by you with an overlay of where we are at in Saudi and where we are headed. Dina, let me bring you in. You were here back in 2017, 9 years ago, putting together the first trip for what was then Donald Trump's first administration. His first trip outside of the country was to here. And you are deeply involved these days as a board member of Meta and of ExxonMobil in looking at what this sort of US-Saudi alliance economy, if you will, looks like. Just reflect on what you've just heard, where you see the kingdom having come in those 9 years, and the risks and rewards that you see of this alliance economy, these strategic partnerships, as it were, between public and private sector.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Becky. I'm so honored to be here and to share a stage with so many friends and distinguished leaders, and my dear friend, His Excellency Khalid Al-Falih, who was indeed our partner when President Trump and King Salman and His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, really envisioned something that probably they did think we were all dreaming could happen. When we convened here in Riyadh 9 years ago, under their auspices, where 54 Arab and Muslim leaders came to the summit. Enormous amounts of dollars were announced and invested and have gone on to make such impact economically. But I think if you had told us then that 9 years later you would have seen the economic, social, and political gains and transformation that we have seen, it would have been hard to believe. Economically, as His Excellency said, it would have been hard to imagine that this kingdom and this region of the world is now the dominant source of capital for innovation, the dominant source of capital for the change that we're witnessing in every industry: artificial intelligence, biotech, robotics, longevity. It used to be you would think about one industry when you thought about this region of the world. No more. This is the fuel. This is the capital of a different kind that is doing that. The second is socially, and I do want to say 65% of the population of the Gulf countries, of Egypt and Jordan, are under the age of 35 years old. So the social change that has allowed more women in the workforce, that has allowed more incredible female entrepreneurs to build their own businesses, and that has allowed young people to have huge vision for what they can do as the founders of the coolest companies coming from the region has really been tremendous. But I think what has been the most historic is the political reform that we have seen, both from all of the openings here in the kingdom and other countries, but the Abraham Accords, the first set of peace accords between Israel and countries in this region in 50 years. The last two had been Egypt and Jordan. I think we are moving too fast sometimes and don't pause on how critical it is that even after October 7th, not one of the signatories of that peace treaty got out. And I believe, thanks to President Trump, thanks to Jared Kushner, thanks to Steve Witkoff, the reason that we saw the ceasefire happen, the release of the hostages, and inshallah, God willing, a more stable Gaza so the humanitarian suffering can end, I think it's because in many ways the seeds were planted. To have last week that announcement not just be by the United States, but over 50 countries again, from Egypt and Jordan, the Emiratis, the Qataris, the Turks, the Pakistanis. This is remarkable, Becky, and you've covered each of these countries for so long, but as a coalition now to bring at least a immediate peace, hopefully, God willing, a stable peace, is really remarkable. And I think those seeds were planted many, many years ago, now almost 10 years ago.
Thank you. I want to drill down on what some of these strategic public-private partnerships should look like. Eddie Bayo, you are a founding partner, chairman, and CEO of Global Infrastructure Partners. The recent landmark $11 billion lease-back deal between Saudi Aramco and your firm, I think, represents a significant step in Saudi's energy infrastructure development, and it illustrates to a degree how global private capital is being harnessed for national strategic projects. Can you just speak to the structure briefly of the partnership and the strategic rationale? And we're going to keep our answers, if possible, as tight as possible, so we can get round to everybody at least twice.
Thanks, Becky. It really was indeed a landmark transaction. And what was fascinating about it was, you know, $11 billion of capital was brought into the kingdom, which is, I think, a third of the FDI that came in the kingdom. But we actually got into trouble with a number of our investors because it was 5 times oversubscribed. So I took calls from lots of our partners who were yelling at us and saying, well, I wanted 500 million and you only gave me 100 million. I wanted $1 billion and you only gave me 200 million. And, you know, there were institutions from Asia, institutions from the US who had never done anything in the kingdom, who, you know, finally found this as a good opportunity. So I think it is a good sign of what the minister was talking about, which is the kingdom and the GCC as a whole has actually become a source of capital. And so I think that's very exciting. And the ability to marry public and private partnerships in a collaborative venture that serves the needs of Aramco, which is raising capital to finance the construction of the Jafra field, but also provide attractive returns for investors, I thought was excellent. And I think it is one of many, many other things that are going to happen in the region.
Patrick and Jim, both keenly focused on the energy industries. So to both of you, and let me start with you, Patrick. I mean, you've been deeply involved in public-private partnerships for years now with governments and NOCs. Can you speak to how these partnerships succeed at scale, and how you move beyond sort of narrow national interests and create genuine shared value? We've just heard about one model, one sort of strategic partnership. What are your thoughts?
You know, it's in our business, in energy, in oil and gas, fundamentally, we are at the core of public and private partnership. You know, the countries own the resources, and we are trying to bring value to the resources. In the specific case of Saudi Arabia, the kingdom owns the upstream assets, and we are there to bring more value on it. And we have embarked into very large, in fact, ventures like our friends of Dow on our side, which was first to build giant refining capacities, $10–11 billion between Aramco and Total. And Total by that time, today we are called Total Energies, I will come back on it. And secondly, recently we have added a huge petrochemical value park, another 11 plus $4 billion of investments. And again, all that is possible because I think fundamentally we understand what are the national objectives, I would say, of the kingdom. You know? And these projects are really fitting well with the idea to bring more value to the oil and gas resource, but also to attract value chain. And this is the whole idea of the value park, to attract more investments in order to be able, I know that His Excellency Al-Falih, I know him for a long, has a dream that one day we can build cars in the kingdom, but to build cars we need to have all the value chain, the chemicals to make tires, and the tires to make, and all these elements together. So I think this is really, if we understand what is the objective, then we can make the right investment. I think my main message today, you speak about pragmatic world, geopolitical, etc. For me, it's my instruction to all my teams in the world is we have to be more local, you know. We have to understand deeply what are the requirements and to even deepen these local partnerships. This is what we have done in the kingdom, by the way. The energy transition is offering us as well another opportunity to bring value to the Vision 2030. As yesterday, we have announced a new investment in a solar plant. I was very happy to listen to Steve Schwarzman in the previous panel who said that people should invest in electricity and power. This is what I'm doing. So by the way, if you want to invest in a good company in the room, buy the shares of Total Energies. It's oil and gas in Saudi Arabia and electricity as well. So it's a perfect model for the future. Yes, we need to invest more. The energy transition will go for electricity, and the kingdom has this vision. And so for me, this is really fitting within our strategy with what the country wants. And then I can tell you, the support of the authorities is very important. Yeah. And we have built these projects thanks to the support, and I can only thank them, His Excellency Al-Falih, His Excellency Prince Abdulaziz, for all their support to these projects.
Thank you. Jim, you're not here to flog your shares, but I mean, if you want to, that's absolutely fine.
No,
but just pick up on this idea. I mean, the energy transition is going to take, you know, north of $1 trillion. The investment needed in AI data center infrastructure is humongous. So how do these partnerships, which are, you know, this alignment is critical at this stage, how do they best work?
You can't break our industry away from the energy industry because we use it as a feedstock. We also use it to transform materials. And so we're tightly linked. And obviously being able to generate that amount of power and do it at a low cost and do it in a sustainable fashion. And I think our industry for decades has been on a track of reducing its emissions and its environmental footprint, but also being able to bring the next generation of innovations out here and do it at scale. So the scale that we built here in the kingdom was unprecedented at the time, $20 billion in one go for a world-leading petrochemical complex. And this is one of the things that the data transition and the energy transition and the data growth needs, is how do we do this at scale? The utilities themselves won't be able to keep up with these needs. The reliability needs of the hyperscalers and the data providers are 24/7 uninterrupted power, baseload power, and that's exactly what we need as an industry. And so as an industry for years, we built that capacity ourselves, and most people don't realize that, but Dow's a 10 gigawatt generator of power and steam, and we buy and sell 2 gigawatts. So right now, some interesting partnerships are developing. We're working in the United States on a public-private partnership with X-Energy, our partner, to really bring small modular nuclear to the forefront. Small modular nuclear that can provide a small footprint and a manageable capital size, but also safe, new technology, new fuel technology that's safer, it's reliable, it's baseload power. We can do it at the same cost, we believe, as combined cycle gas with some form of CO2 abatement. So if you can do that and bring that in the short term, natural gas will have to provide this power, but in the long term, nuclear will be part of that mix. And as somebody that's been in the industry for a long time, to see nuclear, which is the most logical high-density footprint for energy, together with natural gas, finally be back again on the radar screen is the most positive thing that we have in front of us. But it's also demanding. It requires partnerships, and it requires companies that have engineering skill and knowledge and capability to build big projects to help get these first commercial scale units up so that we can replicate them.
Aliko, Dangote is one of Africa's largest conglomerates, invested heavily over the years in a number of big projects across sort of power, infrastructure. When you listen to Jim describing where his thinking is at, I just wonder, can you just give us a sort of sense of your experience in investing in Africa and what you need from governments? You're coming at this perhaps from a point that says, Africa needs investment to combat poverty in the first instance. So just what's your perspective?
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank the organizers of this event, for inviting me, and also thank His Excellency, Khalid bin Al-Falih, because we met in Senegal. And he said that make sure you come, so and that's why I'm here. Well, thank you very much. Well, in Africa, really, what we are doing, we have a lot of raw materials of which we need to be converting our raw materials to finished goods. And I think it's one of the reasons why we are leading in the industrialization of Africa. It's not really about making money, it's about industrializing our continent and make sure that, yes, we invite other people to come and invest. Because without us investing, there's no way we can convince anybody to come to our continent to invest. So of recent years, you're talking about partnership, for example, with governments. When we decided to build the largest refinery in the world, which is 650,000 barrels per day, the government also bought in some shares to encourage us. And we are really very thankful to the President of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, for making sure that, yes, he encouraged us. In fact, apart from what we have right now, just last week, we said that we want to make history. We want to build the largest refinery in the world, which we have just announced to make it 1.4 million barrels per day. The issues about investing in Africa, not only Africa, is to do with everywhere, is to do with consistency in government policies. What we have had before in Africa has actually been a major challenge, where anytime when there's a change of government or change of minister in a certain ministry, the entire policies change. And it's like you playing football when you're about to score a goal. Somebody will tell you that the goalpost is behind your back. So by the time that you turn, you'll be late. So I think right now we have major consistencies in terms of policies in some, countries. Of recent areas where we thought we even go and invest. Ethiopia, of recent, we just launched a 3 million tons of urea, the first in East Africa, and we're going to start the project beginning next year, and we'll finish within the 3 years. But what did the government did? What they said, okay, to encourage you, we'll buy 40% of the company. They invested 40%, and they guaranteed takeoff of the entire 3 million tons of urea. I mean, that's really what you call partnership. So we have this partnership which is costing us about $2.5 billion, dollars. And we're looking for more African countries to partner with, to go through this trajectory, because we need to really create jobs. I mean, I heard of some of the Middle Eastern, GCC countries, the population, where they say 65% is below 35 years of age. In our part of the world, it's actually 75%.
Wow.
Yeah, 75% is actually below the age of 35.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of situation we have.
Rania, you're Minister of Planning, Economic Development and International Cooperation for Egypt. And you just listened to what Aliko has said here and some of the thoughts from our board here. I just wonder whether you can firstly give us your sense of, where you see this sort of, loosely termed alliance economy as sort of, going at this point. But very specifically, I want you to speak to the role of government as an enabler, the importance of setting clear rules and policies and ensuring transparency and predictability. I mean, Egypt has made significant progress in establishing and promoting public-private partnerships across various sectors, including infrastructure projects and healthcare and the energy sector. But these are not without their challenges, are they?
Well, first, thank you very much for the invitation, Minister Falih, and congratulations for the 9th FII. I think I only missed one during the whole years. A few things. When we saw the outcomes of the FII compass, I think two things are very striking. Number one, cost of living for people, and number two, jobs. The only way that any country will be able to move ahead on these is through alignments. And alignments here are very important in the sense that they create the resilience that countries need in order to face shocks. Today we have shocks related to supply chains, climate, energy. So governments can't do it alone. The private sector needs to see that risks are manageable. And that is only possible if we have aligned incentives from both sides. So alignment is extremely important. It's not just the words. Under it comes many pillars of action. Some of those definitely include clarity with respect to rules, commitment when it comes to what is it that we want the private sector to invest in, and as was mentioned, to alleviate the problems and the bottlenecks that come along. The other issue which is important is the clarity with respect to policies. And when we say alignments, I just want to give, when we're talking about regional cooperation, and with Saudi Arabia, for instance, we have connectivity on electricity. There's a consortium related to governance. So this is an example of alignment. In the case of Egypt, growth, jobs, and resilience are key to us. We've put together an economic narrative for development, and it includes all the reforms related to that. You mentioned infrastructure. Without infrastructure that was invested in over the past years, be it logistics, ports, the grid, etc., we would not be able today to have very big companies in the renewable energy working in Egypt, Aqua Power, just to give an example, and many others. You mentioned transparency and trust. Transparency and trust, we need to create a balance between being rigid with regulations. Regulations are important because they provide certainty, but when they're too rigid, it does not allow for the innovation to take place. So we need to have that balance where we take a look at creating that relationship between flexibility when it comes to trying to be more clear with the data requirements, the frameworks. So all of these require operational flexibility. Yeah. And just to also sum up with everyone, the idea of institutions doesn't need to be personalized. You want to have a 5-year plan, regardless of which government comes in. This is the plan that is accepted in Parliament, and therefore there is a monitoring mechanism that takes place so that you're not just left as a private sector with the uncertainty related to whether it's policy or projects which you can be involved in.
I didn't mean to go around this table in a sort of geographic sort of way, but I think I have managed to do that. So let me move into a slightly different, the zone that we haven't explored yet, and get the thoughts of the Honourable Paul Chan, the Financial Secretary for the government of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China. You've advocated several strategies for Hong Kong to maintain its competitiveness in the global markets. Yeah. I just want to, firstly, could you just share your thoughts on the trip that Donald Trump has this week to Asia? I wonder if you can just give us a perspective from your point of view on the relationship between the US and China in the first instance. But secondly, and keeping perhaps more to the focus of this panel, Just your sense of the risks and rewards, the needs to ensure, when we look at these public-private alignments, the need to ensure that there are sort of shared values and opportunities at the back end of these projects.
Yeah, thank you, Becky. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be with this distinguished panel. On the U.S.-China relationship, I think the talk has been going on from the Chinese side, obviously taking a very pragmatic attitude to find solutions, to find common grounds. And despite there are certain competition in certain areas, but on the other hand, there are areas that we can work together. Say, for example, climate change. Say, for example, how to use our respective economic strength to help the global South to prosper. How to stimulate the AI development to the benefit of mankind. So I think there are a lot of common grounds that we can work together. Coming back to PPP, public-private partnership, our experience is that we must take there's no fixing one formula fits it all. No, we must be flexible. And we must be conscious of the fact that we need to come up with something which are win-win situation, also good for the business. So say for example, for infrastructure development, for the Cross Harbor Tunnel, we use BOT. You build, you operate. After a number of years, you give it back to the government. And within this period, they earn a reasonable return and even a decent return. That is one model. But railway development, say for example, capital investment, very heavy at the upfront. And it is very difficult to make money from the railway operations because this is public transport. So how to make this with incentive to the private sector? We adopt a model of railway plus property. So you build the railway, we do the calculation and the projections on an open book basis as to the projected passengers, projected revenue, and the shortfall in terms of return on investment. Then along the railway, we are happy to give them property development rights at the different stations so that they can use the development profit to cost-subsidize the railway operation. That is another model. Lately in Hong Kong, we are embarking upon a very massive project called the Northern Metropolis, which is about 1/3 of Hong Kong's size. And the vision of this Northern Metropolis is not just for housing accommodation, but as a hub for our innovation and technology sector, because we believe in the coming decade, this would be the basis of competition. And this will also enable us to diversify our economic structure, to offer more quality jobs for our people. So in doing that, we take a multi-pronged approach, attracting strategic enterprises, doing co-investment with them, more flexible in terms of land grant. And we have a company owned by the government, which the function of which is patient capital. We call it Hong Kong Investment Company. So if you come, you bring along your technologies, you create your employment, meaning that it is not simply a financial investment, but with social impact. We are happy to come in as co-investor. We also use this company to work with fund management companies to set up different funds, strategic development funds, innovation and technology funds, so that we use this company as a lever to leverage private capital to the sectors that we want to develop.
Thank you. Masahiro Kihara, you're President and Group CEO of Mitsuo Financial Group. A key player in the global infrastructure financing landscape. As you listen to the points that have been raised around this table today and the discussion that we're having, what's your perspective?
Well, thank you very much for having me, and Your Excellency, thank you for having all of us here. I would say that as a bank, it is important for us to figure out what is the strengths that each of our clients has. And we have clients all over the globe. So what are their strengths? And make sure that that strength is leveraged from a public-private perspective. Now, Japan is also trying to drive this public-private thing. And we have figured out what are the strengths that Japan has that we can have a competitive edge so that, we can be a little bit self-sufficient. Having said that, I think a country cannot be self-sufficient for every aspect, right? And you have to collaborate with nations. And for us, I think it is important to connect the strengths, the Japanese strengths, to other nations' strengths, Saudi Arabia's strengths, so that you can get innovation, you can get sustainable growth around the globe. And I think that's very imperative for us as a global financial institution. I'll stop here.
Thank you. You did me a favor. We've got 10 minutes left, and we've still got to take first comments from two of you. Dylan, your perspective.
Well, I come from a part of the world where public-private partnerships have been there for a long time. Because it's been needed for economic development of countries. So I would say that the first thing you have to do if you want to have effective public-private partnerships, and by the way, it's going to be more relevant in this new world because of the need for governments to manage their fiscal balances, given what's been happening in the last few months, as they think about social programs and yet think about infrastructure needs, to invite private capital to come in side by side with them to deliver the infrastructure that's required to uplift communities and get economic development up and going at a decent growth rate. And I think that the first thing governments have to do is to figure out the policy framework that makes it conducive for capital to come in side by side, domestic and foreign. And that means that you have to have a very clear governance framework together with that, because ultimately it's a question of bankability. And that's important because the ultimate ability to get capital in, foreign capital, which is equity capital and therefore risk-based capital, is to effectively reduce the cost of capital on a project. And that means risk-based approach to reduce the cost of capital. And then you will see capital coming in and on a more regular basis. And so the idea of incentives is one thing, but the idea of what is the output and the use of the output is another. Now, in this environment today, the traditional markets are being upended, because we don't know how it's all going to settle down, because the globalization that we've gotten used to has moved aside, and we have to relook at a new globalization. Nobody knows how that's going to look like. Is it multilateralism, plurilateralism, coalition of willing? It depends on which issue and what you want to look at. It doesn't matter. There's opportunity everywhere. In that environment, I think every company, every government, every investor has to be a networked organization, because you can't get anything done without partnerships today. And cross-border is a very important element of that. And therefore, I really do think that many parties are going to be involved in this, especially if you think about energy, energy security, energy affordability. And I do agree, natural gas and nuclear has to be part of that discussion, and not just hydro or solar or wind or offshore wind or whatever it may be. I actually think that the whole issue of this opportunity is that infrastructure is going to be needed. You're going to be able to create industries around it, and you're going to be able to create jobs. And that's very important for countries. If countries can focus on that, bring in multilateral development agencies to help them with the policy framework, make sure you have clear government framework to encourage domestic and foreign capital, I think you've got a winning proposition.
So as we get to the sort of closing few minutes of this panel, we've been discussing how public-private power brokers sort of forge effective trust-based partnerships that can bridge competing interests and genuinely create pathways to sort of, lasting global prosperity. Lei Zhang, let me just bring you in. You're founder and chairman of Hill House Investment. Can you just explain your experience in joint ventures with public or semi-public institutions?
Absolutely. My answer to that is very simple, which is follow the entrepreneurs and follow the business builders. And they figure this out. And the environment they operate in, look at last few years, has been nothing but short of impressive volatility, if you will, with technology change, disruption, geopolitical. Entrepreneurs, they adapt. They are resilient. Somehow, they can actually turn around, make the technology that's supposedly disruptive to be enabling technology. I'll give you some examples. One of our company we invested is a shoe retailer. shoe retailer, like footwear, supposedly to be the dinosaur of the businesses. Somehow they figure out to quicken the supply chain. Now you can see a pair of shoes within AI design. You can get it within 1 week, even that shoe didn't exist before. That quicken that supply chain, reduce the inventory days, stay close to consumers. This is where technology can actually help closing the gap between the companies left behind and the advanced technologies. So I think if we could follow the technology, follow the entrepreneurs, they could be the technology disruptors. They could be the company who leverage technology to make things better. So if you ask me, there's only one investment strategy I could do. It's very simple. That if we could invest an index, what they call human ingenuity index, that we should go all in for that, human ingenuity index.
Saudi loves a new index. There you go. There's a suggestion of one. We've been discussing with some of the world's most effective power brokers how to keep this sort of fragmented world from fragmenting further. I'm sorry that we haven't had an opportunity to get around the room more than once, around the table more than once, but very much appreciate everybody's thoughts. And I just thought with the last couple of minutes, I'm just going to, Excellency, give you an opportunity to provide some closing remarks, if you will, given what you've just heard.
Well, I think we've heard a lot of nuggets and really the pillars of what partnerships and what investment today needs to be. And I would have to say, just we in Saudi Arabia realize strongly that public stands, the government stands for the public. So we realize that for business people, they have choices. Even Saudis have choices to invest abroad, but certainly international investors have choices, and the world is seeking capital and providing the kind of risk-return trade-off that everybody will go for. And we try to reduce the risk to the maximum extent possible. So risks that the government can neutralize or own, we own it. Risks that are related to the market, execution, technology, obviously the investors own it. We're committed to reducing barriers to doing business for Saudi, international, regional investors. So ease of doing business keeps us awake at night, and we have skin in the game. Not just money, but execution. I think, as I mentioned in my first question, if you want a country that can co-execute, co-plan, co-develop, co-innovate with you, and I'm sure some of you who have invested with partners here in the kingdom. In fact, when I talked about the tremendous numbers we have deployed in investment to get to where we are today, a lot of those investments are globally leading in terms of quality, in terms of competitiveness, and they have been driven many times 100% executed by some of the greatest companies in the world who are Saudi. But we're happy to partner. I think the key of the 3 Ps is partnership, and I've heard it from each of our colleagues. We do it here in Kingdom. When we do invest abroad, it is the key. And trust is something that, there are a lot of things that come from your pockets, there are things that come from your brain and from the technologies, and there are things that come from here. And if you've dealt with people like we have, because we've been in business as a kingdom for close to 100 years, we know who are the partners we can trust, where we don't have to spend a lot of time looking at the fine print of contracts. And I know I have some lawyers on the table that I will not say, but we want to reduce the business of the lawyers and increase the entrepreneurs and the technologists and the innovators who can co-create that future.
And to that point, and you're sort of underscoring, who your reliable partners are. I'm going to just ask you, in the last 60 seconds, you will be in the States 3 weeks or so from now. What are your expectations for His Highness's, the Crown Prince's trip to Washington? I know that there were many agreements to agree made in May. What do the activations look like across which spaces, which sectors, and what might this audience anticipate?
Well, I mean, when we talked about what are the strengths for the kingdom, to invest with and to invest in. I think one of our strengths is we are connected globally, geopolitically, economically, socially, people to people. And we have, as I look around the table, from China, Japan, Singapore, to Africa, where we have deep, deep-rooted relationships. And Aliko mentioned we were together not long ago, a couple of weeks ago in Senegal. But since then, I've also been to Japan, and I've been to Korea, and I've been to Central Asia and Uzbekistan, a country we love, and Tajikistan. I'm frequently in Egypt. And of course, the United States is our longest-lasting partner. And by the way, I spent a long week, including time with the Honorable Paul Chan in Hong Kong 6-7 weeks ago. Our relationship as a country, forget about my travel schedule, are deeply rooted. We have a strategic partnership with China, but you'll go back to the 20s and 30s to find the roots of our relationship with the U.S. The U.S. is the biggest investor in the kingdom. Our currency is pegged to the dollar. Our income is mostly earned in dollars. Our global investments are concentrated by virtue of our own interests in the U.S. We had President Trump is a great friend of the kingdom, the Crown Prince. I think that's been documented and proven. And he chose twice when he became president to make Saudi Arabia his first. This is highly valued, but it's also, we believe, in the interest of the United States to have in the Middle East a stable partner, an enlightened partner in the person of His Royal Highness, His Majesty the King, but also in a government that is steadfast on what are its values and what are its principles, and that the United States can partner with in economy, in trade, in investment, in stability in the region, but also in the hundreds of thousands over time of Americans who came here and work, and this has been their home, thousands of companies who invest in Saudi Arabia at scale. And we heard about GIP, we heard about Dow, we have thousands of them. Many of them, just this week, we celebrated JP Morgan being here 90 years. Regional headquarters, and they have choices. Citi, 2 days ago with James Fraser, we also marked 70 years of Citi being here on the ground in Saudi Arabia and choosing Saudi Arabia to be their regional headquarters. So the trip, when it happens, will be simply continuing on building on that bedrock of relationship based on partnership and trust, common interests, common values, which is not exclusive to our relationship with the U.S., but certainly the U.S. is the longest lasting and the strongest.
You're the most consummate diplomat I know. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you all very much indeed for being with us today.
Thank you, Becky.
Wow, wonderful.
I like it. HII.
Okay, wonderful.